The next big episode now in Pompey's career is the pirates. It's a big set piece. Pompey's going to get more feathers in his cap. So Plutarch tells us, quote, "The power of the pirates was originally based on Sicilia, and at first the pirate fleets employed hit-and-run tactics. They gained confidence and daring during the period of the Mithridatic War, when they took subsidies from the king and served in his interest." So if you remember, Sulla had tried to put down Mithridates and had beaten him essentially in military terms, but wasn't able to completely wipe him out or hunt him down to the ends of the earth, Alexander Darius style. So Mithridates had got away because Sulla had sort of had to, or decided, calculated he had to return to Rome to defeat the Marian forces of Cinna and Carbo. So Mithridates had got away with his life and had continued all his various annoyances against the Roman Republic in the east. He was still out there. So this is the second Mithridatic War. Plutarch says, "Then while Romans were fighting each other in civil wars at the gates of Rome, the sea was left unguarded, and so the pirates were gradually enticed further and further on until, instead of confining their operations to attacks on navigation, they began to lay waste islands and cities on the coasts. Soon men of wealth and of good family, men who had claimed for themselves exceptional intelligence, began to join the pirate fleets and to share in their enterprises, regarding piracy as a profession in which honour could be gained and ambition satisfied. In many places too, there were regular fortified harbours and signal stations for the use of the pirates, and the fleets which put in at these places were admirably equipped for their own work, with fine crews, expert pilots, and light, fast ships." So the whole pirate scourge in the Mediterranean was becoming a sort of fairly well, or was definitely a well-organised infrastructure. You know, it's a whole thing now. It's not just the odd hit-and-run brigands. It's not just brigandry, high seas brigandry. It's now a whole thing. Almost, well, not almost, a separate power on the seas, and they're screwing with Rome in all manner of ways. Plutarch goes on, "They were certainly formidable enough, but what excited most indignation from the Romans was the odious arrogance of it all. The gilded sails, the purple awnings, the silvered oars, the general impression that they were delighted in this way of life, and prided themselves on their evil deeds. Roman supremacy was brought into contempt by their flute playing, their stringed instruments, their drunken revels along every coast, their seizure of high-ranking officials, and the ransoms which they demanded for captured cities. It may be stated as a fact that the pirates had in service more than 1,000 ships, and that the cities captured by them amounted to 400. They also attacked and plundered sanctuaries and holy places, which had never been violated before. Claros, for example, Didyma and Samothrace, the temple of Chrothonian earth at Hermione, the temple of Asclepius at Epidaurus, the temples of Poseidon at the Isthmus, at Taenarum, and at Caluria, the temples of Apollo at Actium and Leucas, and the temples of Hera at Samos, at Argos and Lacinium. They themselves offered strange sacrifices of their own at Olympus, where they celebrated secret rites or mysteries, among which were those of Mithras. These Mithraic rites, first celebrated by the pirates, are still celebrated today. But it was the Romans who suffered most from the insolence of the pirates, who would even march inland up the Roman roads from the sea, plundering the country and sacking the country houses on their way. There was one occasion when they captured 2 praetors, Sextilius and Belenius, in their official purple-edged robes, and carried them off together with their servants and their lictors. Then there was the case of the daughter of Antonius, a man who had celebrated a triumph. She was captured by the pirates while she was on her way into the country, and a large ransom had to be paid for her release. But the way in which they treated their prisoners was the most outrageous thing of all. If a prisoner cried out that he was a Roman and gave his name, they would pretend to be absolutely terrified. They would smite their thighs with their hands and fall down at their feet, begging him to forgive them, in mockery. The prisoner, seeing them so humble and hearing their entreaties, would believe that they meant what they said. They would then put Roman boots on their feet and clothe them in a Roman toga, in order, they said, that there should be no mistake about his identity in the future. And so they would play with him for some time, getting all the amusement possible out of him until, in the end, they would let down a ship's ladder when they were far out to sea and tell him that he was quite free to go and that they wished him a pleasant journey. If he objected, then they threw him overboard themselves and drowned him. End quote. So the pirates have got sort of, utter contempt for the Romans, just not scared by them in any way. And of course, to the Roman mind, that won't do, especially when the rich and powerful men, even praetors and their lictors, are suffering. When the pirates bring their outlawry right to the heart of Rome, almost, at least in the imagination, then the state decides something has to be done. Plutarch goes on. The power of the pirates extended over the whole area of our Mediterranean Sea. The result was that all navigation and all commerce were at a standstill. Very, very dangerous. Rome could starve to death because of that. And it was this aspect of the situation which caused the Romans, who were already short of provisions and expected a real breakdown in supplies, to send out Pompey with a commission to drive the pirates off the seas. Gabinius, one of Pompey's friends, drew up a law by which Pompey was to be given not only the supreme naval command, but what amounted in fact to an absolute authority and uncontrolled power over everyone. The law provided that his command should extend over the sea as far as the Pillars of Hercules, and over all the mainland to the distance of 50 miles from the sea. So that would include most of Italy. There were not many places in the Roman world which were not included within these limits, and inside the area also were a number of great nations and of powerful kings. Then he was to be given power to choose from the Senate 15 subordinate commanders to whom he would assign their special tasks, to take from the treasury and from the tax farmers as much money as he wanted, to raise a fleet of 200 ships, and to arrange personally for the levying of troops and sailors in whatever numbers he thought fit. The provisions of the proposed law were read out before the assembly and were received by the people with the greatest enthusiasm. The most important and influential men in the Senate, however, thought that such power, without restrictions and without limits, while it might be too great to be envied, was still something to be feared. And so, with the single exception of Caesar, they all opposed the law. Caesar spoke in favour of it, not at all out of any consideration for Pompey, but because from the beginning of his career he was trying to steal into the people's hearts and make use of them for his own interests. All the rest attacked Pompey violently, and one of the consuls only narrowly escaped being torn to pieces by the people when he told Pompey that if he wanted to be another Romulus, i.e. King of Rome, he would not escape Romulus's fate, i.e. to be murdered. Catullus, however, was treated with respect when he came forward to speak against the law. The people listened to him in silence while he paid a long and generous tribute to Pompey's abilities, and then gave his advice, which was to use sparingly a man of such value and not to keep on exposing him to new dangers and new wars. If you lost Pompey, he said, whom would you have to take his place? At this they all shouted out together, we should have you. So Catullus, having failed to get his advice accepted, retired from the speaker's platform. But when Roscius came forward to speak, no one would listen to him at all. He therefore made signs with his fingers indicating that he was against the idea of there being just one commander-in-chief, and thought that a second one should be chosen to work in cooperation with Pompey. The people were furious at this suggestion, and so it is said, raised such a shout that a raven which was flying over the forum was stunned by it and fell down into the crowd. Like a sonic boom or something. This incident seems to show that when birds fall down in this way, it is not due to the air being, as it were, broken and torn apart, so as to make a vacuum, but they are actually struck by the impact of the voice, which, when it rises up loud and strong, produces in the air a kind of wave or billow. Interesting observation from Plutarch there, but, of course nonsense. So for the time being, the assembly was adjourned. When the day came for voting on the law, Pompey went quietly out of the city into the country. There he was informed that the law had been passed, and he came back into the city by night so as to avoid the envy that would be occasioned by crowds of people coming out to meet him and congratulate him. When it was day, he appeared in public and offered a sacrifice. An assembly was held for him, and at this he arranged to have given him still greater powers than those which had been voted him already. In fact, his forces were practically doubled. 500 ships were named for him, and an army was raised consisting of 120,000 regular infantry and 5,000 cavalry. 24 men who had been in command of armies or held the office of praetor were chosen by him out of the Senate to act as his lieutenants, and in addition he had 2 quaestors. There was now a sudden drop in all the prices of foodstuffs, and this enabled and delighted people to say that the very name of Pompey had put an end to the war. Pompey, however, went on with his task. He divided the Mediterranean and the adjacent coasts into 13 separate areas, each of which was entrusted to a commander with a fixed number of ships. This dispersal of his forces throughout the sea enabled him to surround entire fleets of pirate ships, which he hunted down and brought into harbour. Others managed to slip off on their own or in small detachments, and from all directions hurried back, as it were, to their hive in Cilicia. Pompey, with his 60 best ships, proposed to sail against them himself, but he did not set out against them until he had entirely cleared of pirates the Tyrrhenian Sea, the Libyan Sea, and the seas about Sardinia, Corsica, and Sicily. All this was done in the space of 40 days, and was the result of his own tireless energy and the enthusiastic support which it received from his subordinate officers. End quote. 40 days. Again, it's like his lightning-quick campaigns in North Africa. It does seem like when Pompey puts his mind to it, when he gets all his ducks in a row, and if he gets lucky that his enemy isn't a true genius, like Sertorius or Caesar, then he can get things done very quickly. He's a bit like a badass, ruthless CEO that you can parachute into a company, and he sorts things out very, very quickly, and then you can move him on and make him a CEO of another company, and he'll do the same thing. So 40 days, really remarkable, to basically clear the Mediterranean of pirates, if not completely, then largely in a month and a half, or a couple of months at most.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.